So Keep the Wolves Away is a true story written about my father and my family, and about an accident that he had while on the job. I grew up in Freeport, Texas, which is on the coast south of Houston. Chemical plants, refineries, industrial. I lived 200 yards from Dow Chemical, USA. I was born in the hospital there that is now an office building for Dow Chemical. But, you know, it looks like Manhattan lit up at night, but it's just big chemical towers with lights. And there's always an interesting smell in the air and an interesting color to the sunset sometimes. And the ring around the bathtub from the hard water or whatever's in it, you know. But it was a place where everybody lived in the shadow of it, but worked for it and made ends meet. Lower middle class. And my dad worked in those chemical plants. My friends' dads and some mothers worked in those chemical plants. And it was just there, and you lived your life. In the summertime, when the mosquitoes were bad, they'd come through twice a day with the DDT truck, and you'd chase it. You know, chemicals everywhere. And my father worked right out of high school in those chemical plants, and he worked at one and got some training, and then started sweeping floors, and then got on the maintenance crew. And then he got hired on across the highway at a bigger plant for more money, part of the maintenance crew, and he was head of maintenance, and he got hired back across the highway, and he made more money, keep moving up as he could, working hard, gone all the time, comes home dirty, his boots have this interesting smell to them. And that's just what it is. In my teenage years, he worked his way up into a disaster response team where he gets all this training to put out chemical fires and clean up chemical spills. He goes off for a few weeks to Colorado to get all this elite training, and then he comes back and he works on the job. And just a few months in, he and his crew get a call to Galveston, which is 45 minutes up Blue Water Highway, real close to Freeport. And there is a tanker ship, actually kind of a barge with a bunch of tanks stacked on top of it, 5 and 6 high. And it's leaking this very lethal chemical. And so his team gets called. From my understanding, they're calling all of the authorities. They're thinking about evacuating Galveston because it's the same chemical that caused all the problems in Bhopal, India. Bhopal, look it up. It's in a liquid form. So it's very lethal and it's very dangerous. So he gets the call. It's a few weeks into this new job. And he goes to Galveston to the port, and he and this team in full hazmat suits get up on these tanks. And they're checking each of the tanks to see which ones are faulty and spilling this liquid chemical. And there's, from my understanding, and I know this because one of the gentlemen that was on the tank when this thing happened told me the story, because he heard this song on the radio and he knew it was about my dad, and he'd never met me before. And he came to a show and he said, "Is that song about Steve Galloway?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I was on the tank when it exploded. I'm giving away too much." I pulled him backstage and he told me the story from firsthand, and he said, "We're on top of it. There's this valve. It's got a safety cover on top of it. And there's 2 guys here, 2 guys here. And it's in the middle. We have to take this safety valve off the top. And just slow go because some of them are leaking and some of them are building up pressure. But we get it going, and we've done this to a few, and we get it going and we get it almost off, and then the pressure builds and it explodes off. And it doesn't go straight up, but it goes towards, and this is what the gentleman tells me, towards your father and the guy beside him. And so I see it blows off, and it blows towards my dad and the guy with him. And it blows their hazmat suits off, and they're tangled in the railing, and they're like 5 or 6 stories high. And it sprays them with this liquid chemical. It's burning them into their eyes, into their lungs, and they're out. The other two guys are okay, so they come around and they get him down the ladders and across the street. They get him across the street to the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston, the John Seeley Burn Unit. I hope I have that right. One of the best burn units in the world for treating chemical burns. And then my mom gets a call in the middle of the night. And I remember the call because I wake up. She gets a call on the landline in the hallway in the little house that we have. We had a little shelf for the phone. And it rings and Mom grabs it. And I can see her and she's worried. And she wakes my sister and I up. I'm 13, my sister's 11. And she said, Dad, there's been an accident and we have to go now. And I can't remember her saying anything else the whole drive. 45 minutes, middle of the night, up the coastline, you're looking at the beach and you're along the coast and it's just dark. And you get to Galveston and then there's the bridge where the light is and I see nutria rats around. And then next time I remember, we're at the hospital and she grabs our hands and she says, we have to say goodbye. They don't think he's going to make it. And so we go in and say goodbye. He's in the ICU burn unit and he is unconscious and unrecognizable because of the burns. We say bye and we drive back home. And she drops us off and my grandmother's there. And then she goes back. And we just wait on the word. And he keeps living. And he keeps living. And he's in ICU for a while. And then he finally makes it through somehow through ICU. And he's getting scrubbed. And the burns on the outside. And they're got in his lungs. And then he gets his own room for a while. And then he finally comes home and he's a shell of himself. And he can't ever work again. And the whole story is about that. He eventually, after a few years, there was a small settlement. We moved away because the doctor told him your lungs are so ruined. You need to move out of this place because all the chemical plants and refineries. And so we moved to East Texas. And lived there for a while. I moved to Austin, start playing music, and I start reflecting on my life and the things that really mean something. And I come back to this whole thing because it just shaped my life and my family's life. Because I have friends whose fathers didn't make it when something like that happened. It happens all the time. It's just the line of work. It's blue collar and you take the risk. And I thought about how it affected me and who it made me and what I learned from my father and my mother and my sister and everybody when we went through this. And I wrote this song from that place, telling the truth. Every line is true. In the song I say my father's in his 50s because when I wrote it he's in his 60s now. When I do it live I have to say he's in his 60s. It's a real thing.